Hey everyone, welcome to ThinkPeace Astrology. I'm the mind of Lilith, and today I'll be conducting a brief chart analysis for the late Aaron Carter. On November 5th, 2022, Aaron Carter was found dead in his bathtub at the age of 34. According to Wikipedia, as of today, the cause of death has been deferred until his toxicology results come in. So today I wanted to speculate about Aaron's potential cause of death by conducting a chart interpretation to identify the recurring themes in his life that could have contributed to his early demise. I'm not a doctor, I'm not a detective, I'm not a psychologist, and I don't know much about Aaron other than the fact that he was a child star who suffered from drug addiction and mental health issues. And I try to avoid doing too much research on the individual whose chart that I'm analyzing because I prefer to let the chart speak for itself. But the news said that he died in the bathtub, which usually means an accidental overdose or drowning. So I'm going to look at his chart to see if drowning or overdose is a possibility. According to Astro.com, Aaron Carter was born on December 7th, 1987 at 8:02 a.m. in Tampa, Florida. I'm going to use the equal house system to interpret his chart. So based on the birth date and time provided, Aaron has a stellium in Sagittarius consisting of his ascendant, Sun, Mercury, Saturn, and Uranus. His Sun is in the 12th house with Mercury and Saturn, and the cusp of his 7th house is shared by Chiron in Gemini and the Moon in Cancer. Aaron has Neptune conjunct Venus in the 1st house, and the cusp of his 2nd house begins at 25 degrees and 55 minutes of Capricorn. And finally, Aaron has Pluto conjunct Mars in the 11th house. So when I looked at his chart, the first thing I noticed was a triangle consisting of a trine, a sextile, and an opposition. And this aspect pattern is called a wedge, which is half of a mystic triangle. This wedge is composed of the planet Neptune, which represents addictions and drowning, the moon, which represents water, the mother or family and emotions, and Mars and Pluto are forming a vertex connecting all 4 planets. Mars and Pluto represent violence, hidden power, money, and transformation. Aaron had an ascendant conjunct Uranus in Sagittarius, and at the very least, he was a bit odd, eccentric, independent, psychic, talented, and unfortunately tormented because Chiron is directly opposite his ascendant, which is about 11 degrees from his Sun in Sagittarius in the 12th house. I believe that Aaron's identity was a source of pain for him, and this pain pretty much shaped his personality while also contributing to his addiction issues. Again, this is me just speculating here based on what I'm seeing in his chart and what I know of him from the media reports and some interviews that he did in the past. I'm talking about his addiction issues. So speaking of his addictions, Aaron had no problem feeding his addiction as the ruler of his Sun and ascendant, which is in Jupiter, is in Aries, and this makes a trine aspect to his Sun, Saturn, and ascendant. Jupiter represents excesses, abundance, greed, addictions, opportunities, optimism, overconfidence, and wisdom. Aaron was both lucky and unlucky in that he had many opportunities to earn money, but because of his emotional and psychological challenges, he has a weak Mercury in Sagittarius in the 12th house of depression and mental health issues. He used his money to escape the pain of his reality or his identity by destroying himself. And it's important to note that on the day of his death, Neptune, the planet of drowning, is in 22 degrees and 52 minutes of Pisces, the sign of addiction and overdose. And this Neptune transit was in a square aspect to his ascendant Uranus and Saturn. Saturn can also indicate loss of oxygen due to drowning, suffocation, choking, or strangulation, while Uranus can cause sudden or unexpected death due to accidents or neurological dysfunctions, including paralysis. Okay, so on the same day of his death, Chiron was in 12 degrees and 55 minutes of Aries, which is squaring his moon and Neptune in Cancer and Capricorn respectively. So for me, Chiron is significant in Aaron's life because it is in the same house as the moon, which is one of the angles of this wedge that I just talked about. So Aaron had Scorpio in the 11th house, and what is concerning to me is the fact that the vertex of this wedge is in the 11th house of associations, organizations, friendships, wealth, hopes, and wishes. However, Aaron's 11th house is in Scorpio, the sign of other people's resources, taxes, life insurance, lawsuits, sex, death, and transformation. Furthermore, this critical point consists of a conjunction with two malefics operating at great strength, Pluto and Mars, which are in domicile. Pluto is the planet of transformation, wealth, power, secrecy, and crisis. And when I see Pluto in the 11th house, I think of hidden criminal or governmental enterprises where money is exchanged in secret, or immense power or violence exercised covertly. I think of the mob, gangs, record label executives, drug enterprises, or the CIA. To me, Pluto is the sign of the emperor. An emperor has many kingdoms, and his empire is too vast to manage independently, so he may allow kings, the sun represents kings, to govern the kingdom's daily affairs. So like Pluto, an emperor is rarely seen, but his power is definitely felt. Emperors of the old world were often warriors in their youth, and the acquisition and maintenance of power required ruthlessness, fearlessness, intellect, and an iron fist. So then, to protect the empire, the emperor's true power and wealth were hidden, and he only appeared to his subjects when necessary. That is how a lot of these secret organizations operate, and I'll discuss that later in this conversation. So Aaron's Pluto in Scorpio is conjunct with Mars in Scorpio. Some astrologers say Mars is exalted in Scorpio and Capricorn, and Pluto is the co-ruler of Scorpio. And because of this, I think it's safe to say that Aaron has some pretty wealthy and powerful friends from the upper echelons of society to the lower echelons, right? Drug dealers, potentially, okay? And that's not surprising because he was a child star. Somebody had the juice to put him on at a very young age. So anyway, Mars is the planet of violence, passion, aggression, war, competition, and impatience. There is no question in my mind that Aaron's network of friends, which is the 11th house, consisted of very powerful, wealthy, and potentially violent people who exerted brute force were necessary to maintain their power or to take other people's resources, as the 11th house is in the sign of Scorpio with Pluto and Mars. Mars and Pluto sometimes indicate how we die or the circumstances surrounding our death. With Mars and Pluto in the 11th house, there's a possibility that his death involved his friends, his network or organizations that he was associated with, and like on a low level, he could have been supplied dangerous drugs that caused his overdose, or he could have been forcefully injected with drugs by someone he knew who was just following orders from higher ups, right? Which is how some people speculated that Whitney died. So people were saying that Whitney Houston was supplied drugs by another famous person, and they pretty much got away with what they did. And this is one of the reasons why Whitney went to Brandy the day before she died with a note saying that someone's trying to kill me. So I suspect that Brandy may have known who she was talking about, and that's why she passed her the note. Because why Brandy? Brandy is not some big wig executive. Who did Brandy know that could have helped Whitney? Okay? So anyway, Aaron could have been supplied with drugs and then put in a bathtub to drown. But that's just an example. I'm not saying that this actually happened. I'm just speculating here, okay? One more note. Aaron's Mars and Pluto are in his 12th house from his sun. I think that he was also betrayed by the people within his friend circle and network. It was hard for him to trust anybody because it seems like everybody wanted something from him. I get the feeling that he felt used by his friends and his family, okay? Okay, so now I'm going to discuss Aaron's moon in the 7th house, which is in Cancer, okay? In astrology, the moon represents the mother, the family, ancestry, and childhood conditioning. And Aaron's moon in the 7th house may indicate that his mother was his first business partner, or that he had a business relationship with his family. Because the moon is in the house of open enemies, there's a possibility that Aaron was betrayed by a deal that was brokered between his family and these wealthy, dangerous people that are in the 11th house, right? Without Aaron's knowledge or consent. And I'm leaning into his idea because Aaron's moon is opposite his Neptune in Capricorn, which is the first house of the personality and how others perceive us based on first impressions. Neptune can cause confusion, deception, and self-destructive habits and behaviors. And I'll discuss Neptune a little bit. But anyway, the fact that Aaron's Mars and Pluto are trine his moon in Cancer, which is in domicile, to me indicates that there is an intimate relationship between his mother or his family members and these very powerful, wealthy, and potentially dangerous people. Trines are often described as gifts or opportunities that the native does not have to work hard for. But sometimes it's not good to get what you want so easily because, you may not have the age, the maturity, or the wisdom to discern whether or not you should associate with certain types of people. Aaron's Mars-Pluto trine aspect to his moon tells me that his hopes, dreams, and wishes, or his family's hopes, dreams, and wishes, were fulfilled by powerful, wealthy, secretive, and potentially dangerous people who were part of a group or organization. If his family already had ties to these people, it may have been easier for Aaron to get signed to a record deal at a young age, which again is indicated by the trine aspect. He may not have had to work as hard for fame or fortune, regardless of how talented he was. You hear of so many celebrities who didn't get their big break until much later in life. So at a young age, Aaron received a gift of fame and success, but apparently at a very great cost to him, because his moon in Cancer is in the 7th house of open enemies, business deals, and marriage. And to make matters more complicated, his moon is in the same house as Chiron, the wounded healer. Aaron's Chiron is directly opposite his Saturn in the 12th house, which I'll discuss a little later. I don't like seeing the moon and Chiron in a stressful aspect to each other, especially not in the same house, because sometimes this indicates a primal wound associated with the mother or the family. This is an injury that cannot heal, which is why I'm not surprised that Aaron found it very difficult to sustain romantic, intimate relationships with women, or even his own family. Chiron and the moon together can mean that the child was betrayed by the mother or the family. Now, for some reason, I'm thinking about like Macaulay Culkin, the other child star from like the 80s and early 90s from Home Alone, and Jean-Rene Ramsey. I'm not saying that these people were involved in the same situation or they're connected to the same people, but it looks to me like Aaron was placed under some sort of contract which pretty much dictated how his life would end up. And this brings me to Chiron opposite Saturn in the 12th house. So Saturn is the planet of oppression, of debt, tragedy, loss, sacrifice, slavery, old age, legal contracts, and even death. And as a side note, although Saturn and the moon in Aaron's chart aren't technically in an opposition, it looks like the father is in the house of hidden enemies and the mother is in the house of open enemies. I don't know why I'm feeling like his life was some sort of sacrifice made by the parents. The 12th house is the house of hidden enemies, secrets, imprisonment, hospitalizations, death, dreams, suicides, addictions, illusions, and fantasies. Saturn in the 12th house of secrets can indicate a karmic debt that is placed on the native without any knowledge or wrongdoing on their part, especially with Chiron in the opposition. Karmic debts can be incurred in the previous or current lifetimes, and to me, it feels like Aaron was under some sort of Saturnian restriction or oppression because of a karmic contract that his parents placed on him, right? So the tragedy in this situation for me, it seems as if the terms and conditions of the contract that he had written on him were unknown to him because the Saturn's in the 12th house, and they were written to benefit everyone else in his family but him. And I say that because his Neptune's in the 1st house, and usually Neptune in the 1st house children are sacrificed or they are used by people in their lives, and I'll get into that later. So I feel like Aaron was a child that was sold by his parents or sacrificed by his family to these 11th house people when he was younger. I don't think he was aware of what was going on, especially since he had Neptune in the 1st house. When Saturn's involved, there's pretty much nothing you can do except endure whatever lesson Saturn has in store for you, okay? And with Saturn in the 12th house, something may have been done to Aaron behind his back that he could not forgive his family for, especially his mother, because again, his Saturn is opposing the Chiron, and his sun, which also represents the father, and that's placed in this 12th house as well. And the 12th house, again, is the house of hidden enemies. I don't want to say that Aaron was born to be sacrificed, but it seemed as if there was something he was required to do or experience that was beyond his control, that is not something that he knowingly signed up for, okay? So now I'm going to go to Neptune in the 1st house. Aaron has Neptune in Capricorn in the 1st house of the personality. A person with Neptune in the 1st house or the 7th is usually very impressionable, artistic, escapist, and prone to addictions or self-destructive behavior at some point in their lives, okay? This is before they reach maturity. And sometimes they don't get to maturity because they're so deluded by Neptune's influence, they'll destroy themselves because before they get the opportunity to learn from their mistakes. So Aaron's Neptune is opposing his moon in Cancer. His parents or his family may have brainwashed him into believing some fantasy about their family dynamic, which was far from the truth because there's an opposition here. You can't get any further away than the opposition. From my experience, right? Neptune in the first house people tend to be used as sacrificial lambs for other people, their relationship partners, friends, family members, co-workers, etc. because the Neptune person is so ungrounded and their ego identity is so weak that they're often defined by the people in their lives, okay? So they end up serving people or being enslaved by people, or they end up doing what everyone else wants them to do without any concern or consideration for their own well-being, okay? And sometimes they sacrifice their peace, their happiness, and their self-respect in the process of trying to people please and be what everyone else wants them to be. A Neptune in the first house person usually does not know who they are because they may have experienced abuse, oppression, or some other violation of their personal boundaries and autonomy by a much stronger or forceful person. Neptune in the first house people may gravitate towards controlling or abusive types because they often believe that they lack the strength or sense of purpose to control their own lives. Many of them are led or controlled by their delusions, fantasies, and moralistic belief systems that are based on spiritual ideals of unification where they completely merge with the other, no longer existing as an individual. These situations usually end up dysfunctional as codependency and self-sabotage are par for the course, and the Neptune person usually ends up broken, discarded, and disillusioned after they're abandoned by the person who they were sacrificing themselves for. I think as a child, Aaron may have had an idealistic perception of his mother and family. He may have been unaware of how he was being used or betrayed, and when he was a kid, Aaron may have been energetically sacrificed to take care of everyone else. And then when he found out the ugly truth about everything, probably when, a Saturn transit made an angular aspect to the ascendant or his sun, it practically destroyed him emotionally, which more than likely caused him to spiral out of control, destroying his body with drugs and alcohol, okay? So with Neptune opposing the moon, addictions may be caused by emotional issues. And I wonder if Aaron found out something horrible about his initial recording contract, like a death clause. Like when Whitney Houston died years ago, Shaka Khan in an interview said that somebody in the industry told her that she was worth more dead than alive. That is true for many artists, okay? And this brings me to the second house of finances. So the second house is the house of valuables, self-esteem, the things we own, and finances. And the cusp of Aaron's second house begins at 25 degrees and 55 minutes of Capricorn. The ruler of his second house is Saturn, which is in the 12th house of hidden enemies, secrets, self-sabotage, sacrifice, tragedy, death, and drowning. And as I mentioned before, Saturn is the planet of karmic debts incurred from past lives or situations where we have no control, right? Like our race or our social status or the circumstances of our birth. Because this energy is in the second house, which is opposing the 8th house of other people's money and life insurance, he may have been bound to a financial contract that required a sacrifice of some sort. He may have also been a victim of theft or deception involving his family or business partners because Saturn is opposing Chiron in the 7th house. So the ruler of his second house is opposing Chiron in the 7th house, where the moon is also located, okay? Which again is the reason why I think his mother or family sold him into the industry without his knowledge. They put a contract on him, or somebody put a contract on him where they probably would make money off of him if he died. Basically, that's what I'm speculating here from what I'm looking at in his chart. I'm not saying that I'm 100% correct, right? I'm not saying that what I'm speaking facts in the gospel. I'm just speculating based on what I'm seeing in his chart here, okay? Yeah, so this is why I think he was sold into something without his knowledge, and that's a tragedy. And that's also Saturn, because he had no control over the situation. He didn't even know it was in his 12th house of hidden enemies and things you can't see, right? Things that happen behind your back. So in conclusion, the wedge in Aaron's chart consists of planets that represent drowning, addiction, family, money, power, and violence. He was definitely betrayed by people he loved and trusted, and this experience shaped his personality to the point where people started to associate him with his dysfunction and trauma more than his talent, than his celebrity. Aaron probably thought that he was loved and cherished, but based on his natal chart, it looks like he was just a lottery ticket to enrich his family to his own detriment. His family may have treated him like the black sheep because of his unusual temperament, but it looks like he was actually this sacrificial lamb that was used for everyone else's benefit. Because again, this Neptune in the first house placement is not always the case for everybody, but I do notice that a lot of people with this aspect, or people who are Pisces or Sagittarius even, they are often mistreated or put in situations where they're in danger or used or abused or whatever to benefit somebody else, financially, socially, something, especially when it comes to finances. With the Chiron opposite his ascendant, I feel like Aaron was haunted by this betrayal of business partners. I wouldn't be surprised. You know what's really interesting too? His 11th house is where Scorpio is. And Scorpio deals with sex. Okay. Pluto deals with sex also in transformation, so does Mars. I wouldn't be surprised if Aaron was sexually abused. Am I saying he was for sure? But I wouldn't be surprised if he were at all. And that could have been brokered by his family too. That's what I'm seeing here. It's almost like they did whatever they had to do to get put on. And their relationships with these really powerful people was a gift. It was an opportunity for him to become successful, but he had to pay with a pound of flesh to get what he wanted. And I mentioned this before, Pluto requires a pound of flesh. It requires sacrifice. What are you willing to give up for what you want the most? That is Pluto, okay? And this is survival, right? What are you willing to do to survive? What are you willing to do to have fame and wealth and success? There are hundreds of kids who want to be in your place. There are hundreds of children who have talent, who are beautiful kids, right? Why should we pick you to be the next child star? Yes, you're talented, but there are so many other talented kids. What are you willing to do? And I think that his parents were willing to do anything to get money. And he probably found this out later, and it crushed him because if they put a contract on him, we know how these record labels operate. A lot of times these musicians end up mysteriously dead from strange circumstances, like Prince and like Jimi Hendrix and like Sam Cooke and like Michael Jackson. They always die in mysterious circumstances where further investigation is required, okay? And even Whitney Houston, and I forgot to mention her. And for him, I think that's what happened. I don't know much about his music. I made sure to avoid pop music from the late 90s, early 2000s, especially teeny bop pop. Like I may have listened to Creed when I was younger, Creed, Metallica, Tool, things like that, like pop culture music for older people, but the younger teeny bop stuff, absolutely not. So I don't know much about his music. I do know he was a child star though. And so it is tragic what happened to him. I'm not saying that he did not drown. It looks like he did drown because again, Aaron had two water planets, Neptune and the moon, connected to the vertex consisting of Mars and Pluto. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if he died in the bathtub or drowned. But how did he get in the bathtub in the first place? That's the question. And because Neptune is in the first house, there's deception involving this. Like you're not going to get a clear story what happened. His sun is in the 12th house. His Saturn is in the 12th house, right? There's a lot of hidden energy. Whatever happened to him is going to be hidden. Just like with Bob Saget, just like with Whitney Houston, just like with most of these celebrities. Whoever did this has enough power to keep it under wraps and to keep it moving and to collect on the insurance policy. I'm sure. Okay. So yeah, rest in peace to Aaron Carter. I'm going to leave it there. I look forward to reading your comments. If you want to order your own astrology or tarot reading, you can go to mindoflilith.com, fill out the order entry form, and submit payment via CashApp or Stripe. I look forward to reading your comments and your feedback. Please like, share, and subscribe, and I will speak to you soon.